The crown of thorns, perhaps the Euphorbia millii or Ziziphus spina-Christi plant, bloomed during early April, the time of Christ's torture and crucifixion. Though rarely seen in paintings of Christ with the crown of thorns, it would have had flowers bursting forth from the barbed vine, mockingly adding insult to injury to this ironic crown for the King of the Jews. The sponge, impaled on a hyssop branch, was held to Christ's lips after he exclaimed, "I thirst." A jar full of sour wine stood there, so they put a sponge full of the sour wine on a hyssop branch and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished," and he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. This sponge is described by archaeologists as a device comparable to our toilet paper. Simply stated, Roman soldiers would clean themselves of their excrement by dipping a sponge pierced on a branch into a trough of running water. Does this Roman cruelty speak prophetically, identifying him as sin, unclean, the refuse of the world? The suit of armor would have been worn by the Roman soldiers who tortured and executed Christ. The armor was later adopted symbolically by Paul, who was handcuffed to a Roman guard while in prison, as an example of our need to wear our spiritual armor. The nails you see on display are typical of the time of Christ. One of the nails is dated to the time of the Roman Empire. You will also see a replica Roman spearhead of the type that likely pierced Jesus' side, causing blood and water to flow, assuring that he was indeed dead before taking him off the cross. The widow's mites, or Pontius Pilate Jewish lepton, struck during the reign of Tiberius Caesar in Israel in the year AD 29, are reportedly visible on the eyes of Jesus in the image of the Shroud of Turin, a collection of ancient Jewish widow's mite coins, some from the time of Herod Agrippa, are available for your viewing. Jesus alludes to the widow's mite when observing a woman placing 2 pennies into the temple treasury. The Roman flagrum. This brutal tool was used for interrogation and torture. Also known as the cat of 9 tails, these whips were embedded with sharp pieces of metal, bone, and glass. A skilled torturer would be able to rip skin and muscle from the body while leaving organs partially exposed. The victim often died from the scourging. Prior to being flogged, he endured a sleepless night of crushing stress. This caused capillaries in his forehead to burst, producing a mixture of sweat and blood, a medical phenomenon known as hematidrosis. The tradition was for 2 Roman soldiers to administer 39 lashes, 1 soldier standing to his left and 1 to his right. With Christ's body in shock due to the traumatic beating and blood loss, Simon of Cyrene was forced to carry his cross to Golgotha, the place of the skull. Mary's scarf. This scarf, worn by our model for the Mary and Gabriel video, is on display as a reminder that Christ is our covering. He is our spiritual husband, and we are his bride. Everything we have need of, we can trust him to supply. The shroud. The shroud consists of linen cloth with a herringbone weave. On it is a visible negative image of a man who has wounds that match the description of Jesus upon his death. Many believe the fabric is the burial shroud of Jesus. Science has extensively studied the shroud, and various conclusions have been reached. Early studies stated that carbon dating suggested it was a forgery and was not nearly as old as the time of Christ. Most recently, new procedures have dated the shroud to the time and location of Christ upon his death. 3D images, pollen, the weave of the cloth, and actual blood type samples have been discovered on the cloth. Regardless of its authenticity, it serves as an astonishingly clear example of the wounds Christ sustained during his passion and upon the cross.